My next recipe is a steam cake that's incredibly easy, but uses the most natural and healthy of ingredients. It's our British superfood, heather honey.
Long before we imported sugar, honey was how we got our sweet fix. So I wanted to find out more about how we produce one of Britain's oldest and sweetest natural flavours.
The moorlands of Scotland are famed for creating some of Britain's best honey. Here in rural East Lothian, an area of outstanding natural beauty, is where Stuart Hood has the historic right to keep his beehives.
This is ling heather. You don't actually get a significant smell of nectar from this heather. The sugar composition of it, when the bees turn it into honey, is different from all other honeys we have. We have to deal with it differently. It's a more complex honey for us to work with, but it has the most wonderful, unique taste that I personally love.
Stuart inherited his honey-making business from his father.
My father got his very first beehive in 1950 when he was 14 years old. His uncle bought that for him, and it basically became a lifelong obsession of my father. He built right up to, at one point, we had over 700 hives. It's very much been in my blood since as long as I can remember. My very first memory, in fact, is being stung by a bee when my father kissed me goodnight after being at the bees himself. My very first food memory is eating heather honey, and my very, very first outdoor memory is being at the bees. So it's very much in my blood.
Stuart makes 3 different types of honey, all graded by the type of pollen the bees feed on. The trouble is, the bees don't automatically head to the right plants, so it's up to Stuart to move the hives so the bees feed on the right pollen.
This is our first crop of this season, which is blossom honey, which is basically from oilseed rape or sycamore. The mid-crop is what the bees are on just now, which is wildflower, which is the runny honey. It's clover, willow herb, meadowsweet, and this is a final one. This is the heather honey, and we're about to move the bees onto this now, and it's a crucial final crop of our season, and this is probably the very, very last jar of last season's heather. So I'm just hoping that there's going to be a great many more from this season's crop.
And so do I, Stuart, because I want to use some of that delicious heather honey in my sponge pudding. So I hope those bees get busy.
It's impossible to tell how much honey we produce. There's such great scales between production depending on what the weather's like. And if you look at last year, we produced absolutely nothing. So it very, very much depends on the weather.
Making heather honey starts in spring when the bees feed off the blossom and wildflowers like sycamore, hawthorn and buttercups. During the summer months, Stuart moves the hives up onto that delicious wild heather when it's in full bloom.
We're here in the Lammermuir Hills, and I'm basically up to check to ensure that the ling heather is in bloom. And it's basically a position that the bees can actually work at now. Historically, the heather is usually always out in flower by the glorious 12th of August, which is when the grouse season starts. This year, it was starting to come out just a wee bit before that. There was some bloom by the 1st of August, which is quite early. And it'll usually give us 3 weeks, at least a month, just depending which type of season it is. I'm absolutely happy now looking at this heather that I would say 50% of the heather now is almost in full bloom. And that gives us more than enough for the bees to work on. So the time is right, and we have to really start moving now.
Stuart's challenge is to move up to 3 million bees in double quick time. So this is not a job for the faint-hearted. It's best to move bees when they're at their most docile, which always means an early start.
It's 5 a.m. in the morning, and we're on our way to a site in a place we call the Secret Valley. And our whole aim this morning is to get these bees closed up in time and get them quickly put onto the Lammermuir Hills for our final crop of the year, the heather honey, which is our crucial crop to us, the one we gear up to the whole beekeeping season.
Getting this move right is crucial. Stuart earns more money from the bees working the heather than any other time during the year.
We're just about to start closing up the hives for the final move of the season up into the heather. We always now wear our equipment. We'll do this just in case there's any disasters, because if each of these hives will maybe contain 65 to 70,000 bees. So it's quite a potent weapon if we trip up when we're loading them onto the trailer. It's a relatively simple process. What we do is we just close every entrance up with a piece of cloth. that's cut to the right size, strap all the hives so they won't burst open, and load them onto the trailer. We're always working against the clock when we move bees, particularly at this time of year. When we close these hives up, their oxygen supply is taken away. So we've got a real rush against the clock to get them on the trailer, get them to the other site, and get them offloaded. Open them up and let them breathe again.
The wild heather is 30 miles away up on the moors. And Stuart can't be sure his bees will settle in their new home until he's moved them.
We're on the home stretch, and it's just a case of keeping going, getting them laid out and get them opened.
It's the moment of truth for Stuart.
Well, you see, the minute we take these cloths out the hive, they're straight out and they start fanning their wings. It's basically a way of them ventilating the hive. They're trying to get oxygen back into the hive for all the rest of the bees that are inside. Almost immediately, these bees, what they'll do is, after that they're happy that there's enough oxygen back in the hive and they're satisfied, they'll go out in an orientation flight. And it basically means they'll go out in flight, they'll take bearings from the local environment, and they'll always come back to their own hive. That's all the bees, all the hives onto the heather. They'll say it's over to them now.
The honey these bees produce will be world class, and I can't wait.
One of the simple things we have to do when we're extracting heather honey has to be put through a honey loosener, which basically means every frame has to be speared by plastic spears to loosen up the honey, so it'll then come out in the centrifuge. That's something we don't have to do with other honeys. You have to be very, very careful when you administer any form of heat to heather honey that it doesn't start to caramelise. And that's when, even during cooking, that's something that you have to be very, very wary of. And I'm sure Paul will manage that well. I'm not at all surprised that Paul wants to use Scottish heather honey in his recipes. It's got a wonderful depth of flavour. It does very, very well in cooking. It's always been my favourite honey. It's completely unique, but it's just got a wonderful, wonderful taste to it, Scottish heather honey.
Hello, welcome, Stuart.
Thanks, Paul.
So tell me, how did the bees get on up with the heather?
It's been, I would say, an average year. The weather was quite good, but we really struggled for rain from July onwards, which is the complete opposite to last year. And obviously we were down in bee numbers, which affect our end crop. But we have some heather honey, and it's tasting wonderful this year, as it always does, but probably even a bit more special this year.
I didn't realise that the different types of honey was based on the time of year, what they ate.
Absolutely. Wherever they graze, or forage as we call it, it gives you slightly different flavours. The makeups of all the different honey have got different proportions of sugar in them. Mm-hmm. They've got different types of pollen. So this is our very, very earliest honey from the start of the season.
It's like wax, isn't it?
You'll see that's a bit harder in context because there's a lot of oilseed rape in that, and that's high in glucose.
I like that flavour. It's very sweet, isn't it? And the next one, the runny honey. That's the honey most people would associate to.
It's all about the balance of glucose and fructose. The honeys that are higher in glucose will naturally crystallise. Mm-hmm. The honeys that are higher in fructose, like honeys like this, will stay in their runny form.
So we move on to the heather honey, which is this is the platinum one, is it?
Absolutely. Now, the thing about the heather honey, it gives you a hit at the back of your throat. And that's the real difference. It's got a real depth to it.
Oh, it does. It's spicy, it's peppery, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's got that real depth that you can only get in the Scottish moors.
It's almost, it almost kids your taste buds thinking it's heat, but it's not.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. Is it good for you?
Absolutely.
I'm going to prove that it's good by turning it into a heather honey sponge, and I'm going to serve that with a honey cream as well.
To make a light sponge that really makes the most of this honey, beat 3 eggs with some self-raising flour.
Have you ever had honey sponge before?
Never.
Really?
Really looking forward to it.
Sweeten with caster sugar and add butter.
This is one of the easiest recipes.
Add some baking powder and blend together.
Happy with that?
Now for the star, Stuart's heather honey, which goes in the bowl greased with butter.
Now, the heather honey, you were mentioning that it is tricky to use because of the heat.
Very much.
How do you think it'll cope in the steam?
I'm confident that you'll do well. It can caramelise very, very easily if it's not. The steaming's probably the ideal way to do it. When we're processing our honey, we never heat it with air. We only heat it with water surrounding the containers for that reason.
Ah, right, okay. I'm doing a similar process here as well.
Absolutely the same.
Now for the moment this pud comes together. Pour the sponge mix over the honey. Then make an airtight lid out of silicone paper and foil.
I've made a pleat in it, because as you put it across, as with most traditional puddings, it will grow. Do you like steamed puddings anyway?
Wonderful, yes.
It's something which I grew up with a lot of steamed puddings, and I think in the winter, with a little bit of custard.
Oh, wonderful.
Tie the string and loop it round the rim to make a handle.
The reason being is so when you pop it into the steamer, you can get it out very easily just by lifting it up with the string. So that's now ready to cook. Now, what you do, and I've got one over here to show you exactly what happens. Now, this one has been steaming for about an hour and a quarter. You use that bit of string, and then you bring it out. And what I'll do is I'll pop this one in there. Get that one cooking as well. So you end up with something that's been steamed for an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. And I'm just going to release it from its package. It's like Christmas again. Take the string off. Just be careful lifting it up. I'm going to get a plate. I'll use this one.
And what it's done is, Paul, it's retained the actual colour of heather honey in its raw form.
Is that what it is?
Which is darker than this. And that's it looks like a batch of heather comb in there.
So we could be on for a winner here.
Absolutely.
Let's turn this over. It is going.
It's going.
There it goes. Timing's beautiful. Timing is everything. Now, what I'm going to serve this with, instead of custard, I've got some whipping cream here, which I'm going to whisk up.
This dish is perfect with my creamy take on Athol Bros, which is simply whipping cream, a drop of fine scotch, and some wild heather honey.
What we're going to do is fold this through, try and ripple it. I'm happy with that.
Then it's ready.
And there you have it.
For an extra special treat, serve with vanilla or ginger ice cream.
Wonderful.
You're going to have to wait a little bit longer to try it, though.
It's a pity.